Hello. So hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to our stream. And I'm Michael. I'll be doing some drawings at Stitch Media for an upcoming project called Terrarium. And what you see on the screen is basically what we have so far of some ideas and some sketches we have. So yeah, um, let me get my tools ready. There we go. So right now I'm setting up a brush that would, I had this, I had a brush that I liked, which I forgot about it. Oh, right here. Yeah, it's an oil brush. I really like this brush just cause well, it's got a texture that I really like that I think blends in with everything else. I think it's another oil brush. Maybe this one. Nope. So right now I'm working on a isometric view of a landscape. So if you see down here, these are more, I guess the camera is at eye level kind of position where you're looking at a bunch of things, including the sky. However, for an isometric view, you're looking kind of like top down. If you ever play games like Diablo or Bastion or anything like that, it's those are isometric view. And yeah, while that I have these ideas down, I think moving on more kind of like level, not really level, just a different position for the camera. So you get a better sense of how the landscape actually looks. Totally forgot. I have to be reading the chat. Sorry, I am new to all this. Awesome. So these kind of brush I actually haven't been using for like my own stuff, and they're like the default brush. But that's not the point of doing these. It's more about capturing what you want in the landscape rather than the brush looking like a painting. Well, it does have to look good, but you know, it's more about you doing the work rather than the tool doing everything for you. So here I'm just fixing up some parts I think could use more refining. Again, we're trying to get the main idea out here, so anything else doesn't really matter at this point as long as you capture the essence of that landscape. So right now it looks a bit empty, and that's because, well, it is empty. I haven't added anything else yet, but we will. So right now, I think this area over here is a bit too plain. So maybe adding some trees would help, or if you're lost for inspiration, you can always hop onto a new one and start in a fresh kind of eye and perspective. So over here I'm imagining maybe a pond in the middle. So I'm gonna grab the same color, and so the grid in the background is just to help me make sure I'm not off perspective. I want to make sure everything I design right now is in isometric view. And sometimes when you're drawing, you could be skewing your own perspective without knowing because you're so used to it. So this is just to make sure I stay in that point of view. So I think the main problem for me right now is thinking about elevation, because right now I don't have too much elevation. In this one, oh, whoa. In this one, yeah, it's pretty, I guess in a sense, boring in terms of how a person will go through the landscape. If you imagine going through it, you can't really, well, you can hop onto these, but then it's not interesting. So doing this one, I'm thinking more in a dynamic kind of sense, where I'm imagining if I were to play a game, how would I experience a landscape like this? Would I enjoy going through here? Would I be curious to hop onto another place in the area? So all these elements I'm thinking about while doing these kind of landscape. And right now over here I have kind of like a waterfall. I know that's kind of cliche, but it's these simple elements that really make up a landscape. You have to build from the basics, and then you kind of remix it into your own kind of style in a sense. So if you want to do a mushroom tree, you have to base it off of a tree, just like over here. Same for here. I'm trying to do a really standard landscape, but at the same time thinking about what I will be changing after it. So if I'm adding more stuff, how will I add more stuff? Those are the stuff I'm thinking about. So right now I'm blocking in basic colors. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, is it too boring? If it is, and you have to admit it sometimes that what you're doing isn't as interesting, then you gotta spice it up by adding more things to it. So if you have maybe like a cliff, you know, over here right in front of the pond, then that could be something. Or you could have the cliff pop up in front of the lake and basically run it down like that. And now you have a sense of scale in the landscape, so you're wondering the size of the lake in front of you. Add a happy little tree. Sure, except I don't know where to add the tree. Let's add it right here. We're not at the stage to add some trees yet, but for our viewers, we will add trees and then move on from there. No blue at the moment, sorry, no blue. But we will add blue later on. There's a bunch of blue here, but not the blue you want. But we will. So these trees are, again, happy little trees. But we want more unique trees, you know. We want trees that people will feel intrigued or they want to explore what goes on around the tree or even with the tree itself. So again here, I think the scale is a bit too large for this one, so I'm gonna scale up the tree. And one trick I like to use is the lasso tool. So you gotta use what the program offers you, and these are the tools it offers. And these are, it's kind of huge right now, but we'll fix it. We will fix it. Let's up the opacity here. So right now we have a tree. You can always pause to think about what should go next. Because right now I'm looking at this, I'm imagining a whole like scene going on this side, but at the same time I have to keep in mind, is this a scene I should be going for, or should I change it? So right now I'm looking at it and I think there should be a way for people to go up and then on to some sort of next area or elevation to the space. Because right now if we have the people moving around in this area, it'll feel like the place is a bit small, and perhaps that's what we want, like a really small and well-designed space rather than a really large one. But these are like ideas you have to explore while you're doing it. So right now I'm creating a platform for people to go on to. And maybe this isn't our only platform to go up to. Sounds good. We will use it. Let's find the slider first. RGB. Wish we can just type in the. I don't know this. Is there a way to type in the hex code? Copy color. There's only copy color. Yes, but I'm trying to find a way to enter the hex code. If you know how, then let me know. I will. You double click on the color box. Right, I forgot. Okay, I see. So perfect. That's exactly what we want. And we want to make sure we don't add too much of that color, because what we have in the color scheme right now are our relatives. So the cliff aren't in its natural color. So the cliff isn't in the natural color they're in. They're reflected from all the stuff around it. Diamond League. So sometimes I look back to what I've drawn and then I think about maybe I can just take a space here and change it up. Perhaps I can have the camera here and then the bridge going through it. Or the camera here zooming into these rocks crossing here. That might work. So then that becomes an area right here, I think. It's like a reflection of the sky. So let's take some colors from our other thumbnails and we can start blocking in some areas. So right here I'm blocking in perhaps rocks that our character can step in. Whoa. So now you have an area that is around the same as this, but then at a different angle. So sometimes when you explore in landscape, you can think about, I guess, different angles of the same landscape and see how it will play out. If it looks right at a certain angle, it might come out the same, or sometimes it doesn't, depending on what you have in the scene. So I think right now here this part came out okay-ish. I think it's a bit empty, the space. There's a lot of water and not enough plants in a sense. So it might be a cool place to, I guess, for the player to take a rest from all the greens. I think at the same time we can add a bit more green too, because we want to follow the palette we have with what we introduce our player with. So if we have a green palette or more green and blue palette, we don't want to stray too far from it. And yeah, so right here I'm adding some I guess overgrown grass, kind of like a way for people to know that it's an area they can step on, or it's a walkable path. Because sometimes with the water, a lot of people are unsure if they can even go there with water. I mean, most people would just try to jump into the water and they get blocked out by basically invisible wall. But this time we want to indicate that people can walk here, I guess. So over here. And now we have kind of like a mirror. If you ever been to a flat salt land, you'll know that they create this giant mirror when they catch water, and it basically reflects the entire sky, kind of like a giant mirror in real life. So that's the concept here. But now we want to make it more interesting. So we want to add some colors that would pop out to the eye, so people would, I guess, immediately recognize, perhaps through the game or while they play the level. Say over here, if we have, if you ever study plants, you'll know there's a plant called Forget-Me-Not, and it's kind of like bluish purple, and they stand out quite a bit in the wild. So maybe we can have something like that. Actually, it doesn't stand out. I lied. Change of plan. Let's use red. So I think red would stand out a lot more because we have a lot of blues in here, and maybe it stands out a bit too much. Again, sometimes we want to have the plants as a more character rather than a landscape. So in that case, we want to have as minimal plants as possible, but we still want to have a bit of it, just so people know that they don't get confused with what I'm drawing here. So right now I'm drawing a lot of red. Now the problem here is that people don't know the scale of this entire place. Let me fly up close to you. I'm not too sure. I just know the name of one flower that I tried to draw, which failed, which was Forget-Me-Not. And these are, I have no idea what they are. They're red flowers. But I have been looking into a bunch of mushrooms, fungus, not so much flowers yet. So looking at like mushrooms, I've been, I guess, trying to do different kinds of mushroom shape stuff. I think in a sense, those are more towards creating a character, having a more background knowledge of the plants, because then you can really define how the character behaves. For landscape, it's more about scale. It's more about giving your audience the right sense of atmosphere and space, the scale of the space. Right now here, I'm trying to capture the same essence that I have here, which is a lot of blue, gloomy kind of thing. But also at the same time really isolated. So like you're isolated in this place all by yourself. Maybe it's a story about an isolated mushroom, or it could be anything if you can make it enjoyable. So right now I'm trying to make sure I only have this part of my layer selected, and I'm gonna try to change the color a bit. So right now I realize it's a bit too blue, and that's fine. But now, but we want a slightly, just really slightly different color. I think pink flowers look really nice with these. So let's hide the grid, and this way we can start looking at adding stuff on this area. So right now it looks like it's floating in the sky. Want to make sure people know it's water, so one way to do that is we can add either plants from water, or we can do the foam that comes out when water hits the shore. So something like that. So I'm gonna lower the opacity, hopefully. Gotta make sure my perspective is right. And I think even with that, it still looks like it's missing a lot of stuff here. Could be reflecting the sky, or we could have it reflect something else that would give us a sense of scale. I think that'd be pretty cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to do that. So over here, So rather than adding directly onto the pond or the pool, I think I'm gonna do like a reflection that would indicate the scale of the place. So if I were to do a tree, I can indicate some trees in the reflection. So right now it'll look like the tree is actually reflected. We want to make sure it looks like a reflection and not so much of a tree coming out from the bottom. So in order to make sure it's like a reflection, we're using a low opacity so everything can look like it's submerged or reflected rather than a solid color. So right now I'm just rendering some more trees and see how it looks. Again, you never have to really stick with it until you feel like it works. So if it doesn't work, you can always just go on with something else. So right now I think it's missing something. I think it's missing some kind of interest, because right now the trees are really, it's there, it shows us a scale, but it's not interesting. So let's refer back to these and see what elements we can take. So maybe we can have an eating tree or let's try a mushroom tree. So let me see. I'll get myself almost the same color as the pink. Almost, but not there yet. And I want to just have it at the edge so it looks like it's at the top of, so it looks like a mushroom. I'm gonna try to pick some colors here and see how that will look. So as I'm adding more color here, I'm thinking about what's next, because if you zoom out, looking at it, I feel like even in the back there should be more mushrooms or more stuff happening, just to make it more interesting. I'm gonna turn up the scale, the opacity just a bit. So currently I'm thinking about if these are tree mushrooms, how would they look in this perspective? I think right now it's missing a lot of um, movements, yes. It's really still in a sense, and it's not really moving our eye as much as other paintings would or other landscape would. Um, Maybe it's the color. Mm. So right now I'm thinking about making it a bit more subtle. So when people actually walk in this place, they would then see the reflection and think about um, the space they're in. Like, are they in a bigger space or are they in a smaller space? From these kind of subtle indications. Mm, what else? I mean, maybe we can add some fish. Let's try adding some fish. So maybe these can be like tribes in that area. So So right now I'm thinking about having these fish kind of like pop up to the surface, and we want to make sure we're in perspective right now. So basically, Basically, when they pop out from the surface, we need to have some, I guess, water indication to let people know that he's in water or like submerged. And then from that, we can just have a whole clan of fish. And I think that'd be pretty interesting for people to walk through. So we can adjust the different sizes. For me, I always try to merge, or subconsciously I merge all the layers, or just so I have a lot of, I guess, control over what I'm coloring. Because if I were to have a lot of layers, I would just paint on whichever layer is on top. But working in a lot of layer has its perks versus if you work with one layer. So one layer, obviously, if you make a mistake, you have to color over it. Whereas if you have multiple layers, you can always change that specific part. But for me, I always make kind of like a work in progress layer. So I would have I would copy the base layer and basically start off from that, make a copy of the same layer, and then make a copy, so I can always revert back to what I had originally if I wanted to. So over here I feel like the color schemes aren't really working out. So looking at that, I think I'm gonna change I think it's the colors of the trees aren't really working, or the mushroom. They're not harmonizing with the other color palette, like the colors in the area. So oh, that looks really nice. So I'm trying to find a color that would match with everything else in the scene. So there are a lot of purples and pink, and the mushroom just had too much red rather than purple, so it was really distracting. So right now I'm adding a more, I guess, purple and pinkish look, and I think if it does fit slightly better, but I do have to move it because it's a bit distracting. So let me try to scale it a bit. So I think right now we're at this point of doing another scene because we're too stuck on one single scene. Here we have a bridge, not a bridge, a stone path with the fishes on the sides poking out, and you have the scale in the background indicating there are more stuff behind you, and as you're going through the space.
He did a disc utility repair.
Mhm. I think the blue or the navy is kind of too strong, so one trick I use is the replace color, and that way I can just adjust the colors here. Actually, I'll just do this. So let me find blue. Nope. It's not blue. What color is it? Cyan. Yep. What else? Green, is that green? And master. So I think so far it's looking okay. I think the white is a bit too strong, so I'll soften that up by having the colors around it.
Thanks for doing that. Sorry I made up put it up, but
Oh no.
me being a like similar to
Hey, there was gonna be a head injury one way or the other.
okay, but you're gonna okay. You have to grab the middle thing. Yeah, sweet. And then when you lock it, grab it to the other side. You get it? So treat it like an external bolt. Okay.
Yeah, so now I think the whites have been toned down by mixing with the colors around it. Let's see. Now looking at the other ones, we can think about where to approach next. We don't want to have every single painting the same. So over here we have fishes in the pond. My way of approaching is that when I think about a landscape, I don't want to overwhelm whoever is in it. You want to give enough breathing room for people to digest the information they experience. So over here, if they were to walk through this, you have to make sure something is memorable. If you have a lot of things that are memorable, they might just forget it when they go through the stage. So I think having just one or two really, I guess, like a attraction point or some sort of interest point would work in an environment. Because you can imagine going through, if you ever play games, smaller games, you would know that they try not to overwhelm you with too many ideas compared to AAA games where they have everything and everything is open world. We want to keep it small and memorable. So over here I'm thinking walk through here. see the reflection of the mushroom trees or some sort of plants. So I think these are a bit too, in my opinion, too, it's bad. Like not up to the standard of what we've been working on or I've been working on. So perhaps we can come back to it another time for those. And one thing I learned doing a lot of digital paint is that you shouldn't treasure too much of what you're doing, especially thumbnails, because yeah, you shouldn't think of every one of them as your final piece. These are always going to change, and maybe for better or for worse, but they are going to change. So keep in mind that as you're doing thumbnails, don't keep an idea too close to your heart, or you're gonna feel bad when you have to change it. But that's my take on it. So right now I'm doing some color adjusting to make sure this is good. So I think right now it looks pretty good. A bit more blue on the stone. Green, no green. I think blue really captures it. Yeah, sort of like blue-green, dark blue-green. We will sooner or later, but for now we won't. Thanks for the suggestion though. So I think the fish could have a more, I guess, interesting elements, because right now they just look like plain old fish. I mean, it could be interesting, but we want to make it more, I guess, even more interesting. So let's try some stuff that we can do. Perhaps they're skeleton trees, skeleton fish. Hello, welcome to the stream. Dazzling thing. Wow, can the fish be on fire? Let's try that. Maybe it would work. But for now, I think I don't see why not. I'm good. How are you? Trying to keep it professional here, so so yeah. Welcome to the stream. So it's hard to capture fish on fire when they're in the water. So I'll try my best here. So right now I'm just picking colors from what I have below, just because I see the colors are what I wanted. So when you have some sort of glow, wow, thanks. Trying to have an interesting, I guess, talk here. Right here I'm using the gradient tool to make a, whoa, to make a glow effect on the fish. Because when something is burning or something is on fire, you want to make sure it has some sort of light emitting. So after that, I want to just duplicate the layer. Basically, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Actually, I'll just draw it in. So after you have the layer, you want to zoom in a bit. My bad. You want to zoom in a bit, and you just want to draw out some of those reflection on the water. So it might not look too real, but that's fine. The idea is getting across. Keep forgetting that I have to press space. Yeah, and that's pretty much the fish on fire. So if you zoom in on thumbnails, they usually look really bad. That's because you haven't rendered enough yet, and you shouldn't at this point because they're not really ready to be rendered that detailed. But you should keep in mind that if you wanted to, you can. But since you have the idea, so we do have the fish on fire, yes. I'll lower the opacity. So that could be our kind of like an interest point when people are crossing the landscape. So they might stop to admire the fish, or they can just, you know, enjoy the fish being burned alive, or just, if you're into that, then you can just stop and look at those fish. As for these ones, I think we'll think about putting cameras at different location of the places we imagine. So if I were to have a camera here and I zoom into one of the ponds or like some sort of rock, glowing stone in this area, how would that look like? It would kind of be like patches of glowing stone that people can walk through. I think that'd be pretty interesting. Or even have a camera here where you're just looking at the top of the tree branch that would hang up in the middle of the sky as you walk through. And maybe that could be like a breathtaking kind of moment in game where people feel like they're in the air, and maybe we could make them fall and you could like lose some of your characters or mushrooms if they fall off the ledge. So that's like that'd be a pretty cool idea. Or even here, you know, you have a camera here zooming into the mouth of the tree as you go in. So that'd be pretty cool, like an incinerator, but with a giant tree. So the tree is like absorbing everything that you have. Yeah, I think, but other than that, I think this piece, fish on fire, fish no fire. So. Whoops. Overlay, no. Color. No. I think normal is fine. Normal is fine. Want to lower the opacity. And yeah. So fish on fire, fish no fire. Either way, I think it's a different message if they're on fire and if they're not on fire. I think the concept is there with the whole crossing Stonebridge, um, and basically meeting with the getting a sense of the space with the reflection. This got well, I mean, if you think about SpongeBob, it could be pretty depressing depending on how you watch the show, right? If you're just enjoying what he's doing, then sure. But if you think about his age and his job, it gets depressing real fast. So try not to think about all that aspect inside this game. It's more about just enjoying the journey, right? So laughing at basically what could potentially happen, or um, stuff like that. Um, but other than that, I think enjoying the journey. Yeah. So if you're really hoping to see more of us, yeah, stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy watching us. So we'll be back soon with more updates and yeah, our process. So see you soon.